Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Retirement Readiness Podcast. I'm Katie Umland, head of marketing here at Prairie View, and of course, I have Tim Regan, the founder.
Hey, Katie, how are
Hi.
you?
Thanks for joining us this week. This week, we're going to be talking about the roadmap to financial disaster.
Hopefully that's not our specialty.
How to manage to go broke. So kind of the opposite of what we normally talk about.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny because when we were doing this or thinking about this episode, I'm like, do we really want the first thing people like when they Google, how do I go broke for Prairie View to come up? Right. But really, I think that it's kind of appropriate because we talk a lot of times about how do I make good decisions, but sometimes financial planning is all about how do I avoid making bad decisions as well. And so maybe today we can cover some of the things that we see that can lead to ended up not in a good place.
It's kind of also that old adage, like, I don't learn from somebody's victories. I learn from somebody's mistakes.
Yep.
Or even myself. My own mistakes in moving forward. So maybe it's kind of like the same thing. So what are the biggest mistakes you see people when withdrawing their retirement income?
So I don't know if it's a mistake or not, but something that we see as people hit retirement is I kind of think about it like the monopoly money bank just became yours. So what can happen is we have sometimes clients that fall into one of two categories. The first client tends to be a little too frugal. They look at it and say, I quit working. I'm never going to work again. This is what I have
to make this last forever.
Yeah, that's all the money I'm going to ever have. So I'm not spending a dime. And then we have the other clients that were like, for years I've been putting this money into the 401k. And all of a sudden, the monopoly.
I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like monopoly money your whole career because you can't touch it.
You don't barely see it.
Yeah. And even when I do, what difference does it make to me type of a thing? Where then all of a sudden I'm retired and it seems like, wow, that's a lot of money. Let me make it rain. And so the monopoly money starts flowing too quickly. And what can happen is, especially when you start thinking about the way investments work, if I retire at a time and let's say the market's doing really well and we had a 10% up here, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I could spend all that money and it didn't even touch my principal. And so all of a sudden you spend all that money and then next year it's the other way and that can get people into trouble. Especially when you start building lifestyle that way. What we found you might remember Dad used to talk about it a lot. He's like, when you think about your lifestyle, as you have more money, your lifestyle increases, but it's not like one part of your lifestyle. All of a sudden you notice I used to buy the cheap garbage bags from the dollar store and now I'm buying hefty or whatever. I used to wash the Ziploc bags and reuse them once or twice and now I don't. I used to get the real junky paper plates and now I get Chinette. And so your entire lifestyle expands. And so what we see is if people come too hot out of the gate, spending too much money, expanding their lifestyle because they feel like they got all this monopoly money to spend. And then a year or two or three later, all of a sudden, like, man, we got to pare that back. It's really hard to figure out how do I pare it back because everything in my life just got a little bit more expensive. So that's one of the ways we see people really having issues if they come too hot.
And that can, if let's say that they were a client and they're leading up to retirement, you kind of help them to understand about how much they would have in a year to spend. Like, it's not just, okay, here's your lump sum, like figure it out for yourself. Like that's something that you would help them
Absolutely.
with, right?
It's almost something like you have to, and you have to start projecting out a little bit around what are some of the expenses that we think will go away? You know, hey, by the time I retire, the mortgage is paid off. So, okay, well, we don't need that income. So what does that look like? And, really mapping out how do you have it? Because if you spend too much, especially as the markets are volatile, you're going to run out of money and you're going to go broke.
Just hearing that, like, you're going to go broke is like,
yeah, it is. It's
sounds
a scary,
terrifying. Yeah.
Scary thought for sure.
Okay. So what about taxes? How big of an effect?
It's unbelievable what taxes know. And that's why I think a lot of times, even on our show, we're talking a lot about this difference between Roth IRA, traditional IRA, where should I have my money? The amount of money that taxes or the burden that taxes have on your investments is unreal. So for example, when we talk tax, what I think about tax, I think about it as drag. on your money, right? Something that drag being if you're in a boat and you're going across the lake at 100 miles an hour, not that you would, but let's say you were, the water creates a lot of drag and it keeps the boat from being able to just go real easily. And really taxes are kind of like that same thing. The more money you make, the higher the taxes. That creates drag on your overall portfolio. And so included in that are things like the premiums you pay for Medicare. So when you retire and at age 65, you have two parts to Medicare. The first part is what you paid into your entire career, and you don't have to pay anything when you get retirement. The second part you've never paid on, Medicare Part B, and you have to pay Medicare Part B premiums to have that coverage. Well, but and here's where it gets really, really, is the more income you have, the more that premium is. And so what we see sometimes is people don't think about, oh, you know what? I want to take a big trip when I retire. I've always wanted a new car. So I'm going to treat myself in my first year retirement. I'm going to go on a big trip, buy a new car, and spend a bunch of money on the kids. All of a sudden their income went way up, and now their Medicare premium went way up, and they're in a higher tax bracket. And so what they thought was going to be a kind of treat yourself kind of moment, all of a sudden turns into, it just cost me tremendously more money. And now
I have all these a higher expense.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden now all of that drag, and now that's another way that if people aren't intentional about it, all of a sudden, if I add an extra 10 or 15% in drag, whether it be taxes or Medicare premiums or whatever we want to consider there, all of a sudden I run out of money much quicker because of that extra cost. And you don't get anything for it, right? Your Medicare, you had Medicare, whether you paid a small premium or a little premium, it's the same Medicare.
So how do they does somebody help you predict what your Medicare cost is going to be, or how do you plan for that?
Yeah, they should. I mean, if you're working with a financial advisor, they should help you to do that. And that's the hard part when people hit retirement. I had somebody tell me one time, you've got these different categories of things. You've got things that you know, things that you know you don't know, and then things that you don't even know you don't know.
Yeah.
And what happens is that a lot of times as people hit retirement, that category of things they don't even know they don't know is really big.
Yeah.
And so that's where hopefully they're working with somebody that can help them to make those decisions in a smart way.
Okay. So shifting gears a little bit, is it better for me to pay for everything up front or to take more income?
Yeah, totally another way that people end up kind of falling down this trap and running out of money too soon. The thought is I have all this monopoly money again, right? So I'm no longer going to finance a car. I'm going to pay cash for it, or whatever little mortgage I've got left, or big mortgage, whatever it is, I'm going to take that money and pay it all off. And that goes back to even that previous conversation around, you have to be careful, because it's not just a question of, will I make more money in that investment, or is the interest going to cost me more? It really goes into your taxes, your Medicare premium. It's just a much bigger question. And so sometimes the knee-jerk reaction of let me pay cash for everything really can help you pay too much through all that extra stuff that
I'm just kind of learning that lesson, I guess. My reaction is always like, I just want to pay all my debts and I want to get that just cleared, but that's not always the best choice.
Yeah. So I don't want to mislead anybody. Being debt free, never a bad thing. Right?
Right.
Never a bad thing. And the idea that I want to pay that off is always a good idea. The only question is, what's the cost in paying it off? And is there a smarter way for me to work that?
Should I have taken the money I was going to pay off my mortgage, and should I invest it somewhere else that has a higher return that's less, or that's greater than my interest rate?
Yep. So yeah, absolutely. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, I'm retired now and I want to have my mortgage paid. Let's say I owe $50,000 left on my mortgage, and I could take that out of my retirement account and pay it off. However, to do that, it's going to put me in a higher tax bracket. It's going to have my Medicare premiums go up. So all of a sudden, for me to do that, it's going to cost me an extra $5,000, for example, and all those extra costs to do it. Well, if instead I just said, I'm going to take $10,000 extra out every year for the next 5 years, I'll still get my $50,000 mortgage paid off, but now I don't have all those extra
Those
costs
extra
potentially. So
penalties.
yeah, exactly. And when you think about it, if you did that, if you look at your entire portfolio and you have these extra taxes, extra Medicare premiums that equal 10%, that's a huge number against that entire portfolio. So you're going to run out of money if you're not careful and diligent about managing those.
And knowing like what levers get pulled when you make
Absolutely.
these decisions.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so shifting gears again, talking about how to go broke. What if your kids can't quite seem to launch? What if they're still broke?
Yeah.
Like, how long should you support them? What does that all,
Yeah.
steering from the parenting advice, but
Yeah. Okay. So now that we started our counseling session, which it's funny. As I talk to my kids potentially coming into the business with this, they all think, well, I don't know if I like to talk about money and all that stuff. And probably 90% of our job has zero to do with money.
Yeah.
It's all about like,
tell us about your family update.
Yeah,
What are your kids up to?
And half the time people leave like, oh, I feel like that was a counseling session, which is not who we are. But yeah, so away from the parenting side, what happens is as people get close to retirement, they have to start deciding what are my priorities. And what we see many times happen is I've got a child who has not launched yet, still living at home, or even sometimes kids that have launched, but not officially or thoroughly launched. And all of a sudden I'm paying a lot of expense that as an adult person, they should be paying. And I'm back to now my retirement could very easily support me and my spouse throughout our lifetime. But when our retirement now has to support me, my spouse, my son or daughter, and their spouse, all of a sudden I go broke really quick because that's not what it was designed to do. It was designed to support two. And so there's nothing wrong with that if that's your choice, but just know that going into it, we've had to have difficult conversations sometimes with clients to say, if you're choosing to do this, there will come a time when you're maybe going to have to go back to work. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to reverse this because you're going to run out of money because you're supporting.
So like when I was 16 and mom and dad told me they'll pay for my car insurance through high school, but that was it. And then I got to college and dad was like, okay, until you're 21, we'll pay for your car insurance. And then at 21, he was like, well, you've done this work for us this year. We'll pay for your car insurance one more year. And then eventually Alex took over for me.
So it's really kind of funny that you say that because being the oldest and being a boy in our family,
yeah, much different.
Did not have any of those conversations. Yeah, no. Dad treated us quite differently.
Well, we each had our own experiences. Right. Okay, so what tends to be the biggest expense that people don't plan for that can?
So it's funny. When people get into retirement, it's on their mind, but they never think to plan for it. And it's what happens if my health fails? What happens if I need some sort of care as I get older?
Or rehab
or maybe I just get more forgetful or, like all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of funny because here too, people usually fall into one of two categories. That type of eventuality is something for some people that really is concerning to them. And they want to like take out some sort of long-term care insurance or something like that to get it off of their mind. And then other people just want to say, you know what? I don't think that's ever going to happen. I ain't going to look at it. And they don't value
the peace of mind. They don't need that as much.
And so what can happen is if you ever need care, you could bankrupt your spouse really quick. I mean, that money goes really fast at that point in time. And what we've actually found, what's kind of funny is people will say, well, I don't want to take out long-term care insurance because it's too expensive. And I don't want to pay that premium. And then say 10 years later, we'll be in retirement and they're not really doing the stuff they could. They're not spending the money that they could based on how much they have. And I'll say to them, well, why aren't you doing it? Well, I don't have enough money. We've got this whole account here that we're not even touching. Oh, I can't touch that. That's my long-term care money. Well, so it's almost funny that the people that spend the premium to have the coverage actually live more free and spend their money freer than people that say, no, I'm not going to spend that and try to self-insure. But it's when people don't have any plan and somebody gets sick, especially they get sick earlier, we find spouses then that are really kind of disinherited and they don't have anything left because of that.
I think I would say that it probably depends on what your experience has been like like I know thinking about our grandparents and how long they lasted, like one grandma didn't need any long-term care
Yeah.
and one grandma needed a lot of
A lot.
long-term care.
Yeah.
And I think that that can really influence what your experience was like. And, oh, I wouldn't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, and there too, even if you don't have, let's say you don't have the long-term care uh, experience in your family, us just having grandparents that lived 89 and 94,
Mhm.
all of a sudden the idea that I could be here a long time is in your mind.
Right.
For those people whose grandparents all died when they're in their 60s and 70s, not even
Don't even think
not
about
even
it.
registering, right?
Yep.
And so it's that kind of stuff that then, if you're not careful, really could end up, you could go broke pretty quick.
So what about my investment strategy? Like, how does that obviously can play a huge effect?
Yeah, for sure. So what we find is that people that don't take enough risk in early on in retirement with their investments are more likely to run out of money than people who take an appropriate amount of risk. And when I say risk, if I take all of my retirement money today and I put it into a CD and I leave it in a CD the rest of my retirement, what happens is I will not outpace taxes and inflation enough in order to be wealthy the rest of my life. I will run out of money. I will run out of spending power. So right now we're recording this and it is February of 2023. Inflation is sitting between 6 and 7%, and bank CDs are paying 4%.
Mm.
That is always a spread. Your bank CD never outpaces inflation. It's always less than inflation. So right now, if I'm going to buy a CD that say is at 4% or so, I can't make that up enough so that next year I can still buy milk and bread and eggs to the same degree. And so that's a fast way for people to go broke. And they think they're doing the exact opposite. They think I'm getting really, really conservative, but really they're making themselves more vulnerable to running out of money the longer they live.
So what about when we're thinking about going broke? Should you focus on how your money will last or what age you want to retire at? Like how do we shape that?
So it really, you look at both. But what we find is there are some clients that we talked a little bit before about it. Some clients that just say, at age 65, I'm retiring. I don't care how much money you got, I'm retiring. Surefire way to go broke.
Or it's just like that's what they think that's what you do.
That's the age. That's
you just don't even
don't even think
about it.
The other thing that we find is that people, it kind of goes back to the very beginning of our conversation around how do I regulate how much I spend? There are some people that just have it in their mind that, well, while I'm retired, I'm going to be able to travel and I'm going to be able to do stuff with the kids and grandkids. I'm going to be able to do all this stuff. But that's disjointed from how much money do I have? And so sometimes they just go out and start doing those things anyway, without really doing the math to make sure that it's something that they can't do.
Well, that's probably how their whole lives have been.
Yep, for sure.
That's probably just
how the
mentality they have.
Yep, just how they are. Yeah, and so hopefully, as people listen to this, they start recognizing, there are some things that we can always talk about. What are the things I should be doing? But sometimes avoiding
these are I should not be doing these.
Exactly.
These things. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. We hope you took some takeaways on what you should not do because we don't want you to go broke.
and please don't drive up our Google search for how to go broke with Prairie View.
Those things do not equate.
No.
If you found any of it valuable, please like and subscribe to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And we hope in the meantime, before our next episode, we hope to help you live your legacy with confidence. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Be well.